Exercise, explore the Learn sandbox. Azure Cloud Shell. This module requires a sandbox to complete. A sandbox gives you access to Azure resources. Your Azure subscription will not be charged. The sandbox may only be used to complete training on Microsoft Learn. Use for any other reason is prohibited and may result in permanent loss of access to the sandbox. Microsoft provides this lab experience and related content for educational purposes. All presented information is owned by Microsoft and intended solely for learning about the covered products and services in this Microsoft Learn module. In this exercise, you explore the Learn sandbox. You can interact with the Learn sandbox in 3 different ways. During exercises, you'll be provided for instructions for at least one of the methods below. You start by activating the Learn sandbox. Then, you'll investigate each of the methods to work in the Learn sandbox. Activate the Learn sandbox. If you haven't already, use the Activate Sandbox button above to activate the Learn sandbox. If you receive a notice saying, Microsoft Learn needs your permission to create Azure resource, use the Review Permission button to review and accept the permissions. Once you approve the permissions, it may take a few minutes for the sandbox to activate. Task 1. Use the PowerShell CLI. Once the sandbox launches, half the screen will be in PowerShell command line interface CLI mode. If you're familiar with PowerShell, you can manage your Azure environment using PowerShell commands. Tip: you can tell you're in PowerShell mode by the PS before your directory on the command line. Use the PowerShell getDate command to get the current date and time. GetDate. Most Azure-specific commands will start with the letters AS. The getDate command you just ran is a PowerShell-specific command. Let's try an Azure command to check what version of the CLI you're using right now. AS version. Task 2. Use the bash CLI. If you're more familiar with bash, you can use bash command instead by shifting to the bash CLI. Enter bash to switch to the bash CLI. Tip: you can tell you're in bash mode by the username displayed on the command line. It will be your username, Azure. Again, use the getDate command to get the current date and time. You received an error because getDate is a PowerShell specific command. Use the date command to get the current date and time. Just like in the PowerShell mode of the CLI, you can use the letters AS to start an Azure command in the bash mode. Try to run an update to the CLI with AS upgrade. You can change back to PowerShell mode by entering push on the bash command line. Task 3. Use Azure CLI Interactive Mode. Another way to interact is using the Azure CLI Interactive Mode. This changes CLI behavior to more closely resemble an integrated development environment, IDE. Interactive mode provides auto-completion, command descriptions, and even examples. If you're unfamiliar with bash and PowerShell, but want to use the command line, interactive mode may help you. Enter as interactive to enter interactive mode. Decide whether you wish to send telemetry data and enter yes or no. You may have to wait a minute or two to allow the interactive mode to fully initialize. Then, enter the letter A and auto-completion should start to work. If auto-completion isn't working, erase what you've entered, wait a bit longer, and try again. Once initialized, you can use the arrow keys or tab to help complete your commands. Interactive mode is set up specifically for Azure, so you don't need to enter AS to start a command, but you can if you want to or are used to it. Try the upgrade or version commands again, but this time without A's in front. The commands should have worked the same as before and given you the same results. Use the exit command to leave interactive mode. Task 4. Use the Azure portal. You'll also have the option of using the Azure portal during sandbox exercises. You need to use the link provided in the exercise to access the Azure portal. Using the provided link, instead of opening the portal yourself, ensures the correct subscription is used and the exercise remains free for you to complete. Sign in to the Azure portal to check out the Azure web interface. Once in the portal, you can see all the services Azure has to offer, as well as look around at resource groups and so on. Continue. You're all set for now. We'll come back to this sandbox later in this module and actually create an Azure resource.